ADR. Promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar, 1 p.m. in Abuja. Good afternoon and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and online on wadr.org. Welcome to Newslink. Here are the top stories. The Nigerian police blames the Boko Haram terrorist group for a deadly attack in the northeast that killed at least 80 people. Burkina Faso unveils a new digital passport without ECOWAS insignia.
There is no ECOWAS logo or mention of ECOWAS. Since January, Burkina Faso has decided to withdraw from this organization.
Mali publishes a report on the impact of recent floodings in the country. And China-Africa summit gets underway in Beijing as African leaders sign economic investment deals. Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
Here is Abdullahi Hassan with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining our broadcast and a warm welcome to our listeners in the Gambia, Ghana, Liberia and Sierra Leone. We begin this edition of the news with a tragic development in Nigeria, where at least 81 people were killed by a terrorist in the northeastern state of Yobe. Several others are feared missing following a deadly attack that resulted in huge material damage in Mafar. Local officials say 15 bodies had been buried by their relations by the time the Nigerian army reached the community for the evacuation of the corpses. The Nigerian police, for its part, said terrorists from the Boko Haram group are behind the attack. WAD's Usman Omar in Abuja reports.
More than 150 members of Boko Haram on Sunday attacked the village of Mafa in Yobe State, northeastern Nigeria. According to the state police, the attackers, armed with firearms and grenades, fired at civilians at close range. Witnesses reported 81 people dead and several missing. State police, while not giving an exact figure, confirmed dozens of casualties. The attack targeted villagers, mainly farmers and herders, and was reportedly carried out in response to the assassination of 2 Boko Haram members by vigilante groups in the village of Mafa. The jihadists had accused Mafa inhabitants of supporting the army against Boko Haram. As a reminder, in October 2023, Nigerian police and villagers killed jihadists near the village of Kayaya after facing threats, and Boko Haram retaliated by killing 37 people. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
Meanwhile, in a statement published on X, Amnesty International Nigeria said around 127 villagers were killed in that very attack, most of whom were buried on Tuesday. And now to the Sahel. The Ivorian Ministry of Finance and Budget has published a list of 29 people whose assets were seized by the state due to their alleged involvement in acts of terrorism. The list includes foreigners living in Côte d'Ivoire. Among the accused are 15 Burkinabe, 7 Ivorians, 5 Malians, 1 Gambian, and a Mauritanian. This decision follows a comprehensive investigation conducted by the Ivorian authorities. The 29 individuals are accused of serious offenses, including financing terrorism and participating in terrorist groups. Still in the Sahel, Burkina Faso now has a passport without the logo or features of the Economic Community of West African State, ECOWAS. The new generation biometric passport, known as the e-passport, was officially launched on Tuesday by the Burkinabe government. According to the government, this modern e-passport is equipped with an electronic chip designed for the collection and storage of biometric data, enhancing security and efficiency in identity verification. HRTSU has the details in this report filed in by our Ouagadougou correspondent Martin Kaba.
This new passport is presented by the Burkinabe authorities, featuring polycarbonate data pages. It includes several security features, according to the Minister of Security, Mamadou Sana.
La qualité d'un passeport découle entre autres de la route. The quality of a passport, among other things, depends on the robustness of its security features. With this type of page, it is now almost impossible to forge or tamper with the identity of our passports. Nous pouvons faire un enrôlement en ligne en fournissant les données alphanumériques.
Mahamadou Sana emphasizes the reduced processing time for this new passport. The appearance remains the same as the previous travel document, except the ECOWAS insignia has been removed.
There is no ECOWAS logo or mention of ECOWAS. Since January, Burkina Faso has decided to withdraw from this organization, and this is merely a formalization of the decision already made by Burkina Faso.
The new Burkinabe passport is the result of a collaboration between China and Burkina Faso.
A report by WADR's Martin Kaba in Ouagadougou and voiced by Chez Atisu. In Mali, new figures were published on Tuesday regarding the floods that have severely affected the country since the beginning of the rainy season. The current toll stands at 54 deaths, 111 injuries, and over 71,000 people affected, according to the Civil Protection Authorities. A few weeks ago, the Malian government declared a state of national disaster across the entire territory. Here's a report by Aliyu Cham in Bamako and voiced in our studios by Ogi Berika.
According to the latest report published by the Civil Protection Services, at the start of the season, 146 cases of flooding were recorded across the country. These floods caused the death of 54 people, more than 111 injured, and 71,800 homeless. According to the Civil Protection, 6 cases of lightning, 4 cases of strong winds and sandstorms, as well as 78 collapsed houses were recorded during the period from August 1. Ségou, however, remains the most affected region, followed by Bamako. In this region, the Blast Circle recorded 4 series of successive floods causing damage, with 1,387 households affected, including 1/3 by lightning, the same source emphasized. In the district of Bamako, the capital, 563 households were affected, with a total of 4,639 people affected. Overall, Kita is the least affected, according to the disaster map. These people need urgent humanitarian aid, says Civil Protection. Following these deadly floods, the Malian authorities declared a state of national disaster across the country on August 24. They also mobilized 4 billion francs to support disaster victims and minimize the risk of flooding. With heavy rain still forecast by weather services throughout the week, the risk of flooding remains high.
Ogi Berika with that report filed in by our Bamako correspondent Aliyu Cham. We cross over to Guinea, where the authorities have announced several measures to fight against the spread of monkeypox. Conakry recorded its first case on Monday involving a 7-year-old child from the prefecture of Macenta in the south of the country. To curtail the spread of the viral disease, Prime Minister Bauri had a meeting on Tuesday with the heads of the National Health Security Agency. Here's an excerpt of the Prime Minister.
Immediately, we made all the necessary arrangements to circumscribe this epidemic.
At the same time, the Guinean Prime Minister said the government is strengthening controls at the land and air borders while consultations are ongoing with neighboring countries to prevent the further spread of the disease in the sub-region.
We have also taken measures and we will continue to take them to ensure a perfect coordination of our reaction with the Liberian brotherly countries.
That was Bauri, the Prime Minister of Guinea.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Remember, we're live on WADR.org and streaming on Facebook at WADR English Service. We take you now to the Gambia, with the Association of Non-Governmental Organizations, Tango, has denied Justice Minister Dauda Jallo's claims that society organizations were consulted before the 2024 draft constitution was gazetted to Parliament. The Attorney General made the remarks during a press conference last week when he discussed the regazetting of the 2024 draft constitution. However, the NGO expresses concern regarding the minister's statement and maintains that CSOs were not consulted by the state. For more on this, WDR Sankule Janko reports.
Speaking during a press conference last week, Justice Minister Dauda Jallow highlighting the consultative efforts undertaken by the government in its drafting of the document, referenced several times that the government consulted with CSOs in the process. In particular, he mentioned the Transitional Justice Working Group, the Gender Platform and the Youth Forum, among other unnamed CSOs. However, Tango in a press statement says the assertion that civil society was adequately consulted during the initial phase of mediation for the Gambia's 2024 draft constitution is fundamentally flawed and misleading. It further stated that the CSOs were indeed consulted with efforts geared towards bridging the gap in building consensus for the revival of the constitution building process and a way forward for tabling the draft constitution again before the National Assembly. However, the statement said CSOs were not consulted on the matter of the text of the draft, but rather to brief it on a new process to revive the 2020 draft constitution. Despite government assertions and official statements suggesting otherwise, substantial evidence indicates that civil society, a crucial stakeholder in the constitutional review process, was not engaged in any meaningful way, the statement added. It stated that as the umbrella association for CSOs, Tango's board and secretariat have not been involved or consulted in the process of drafting the gazetted 2024 draft constitution. Meanwhile, Tango has called on the Parliament to create a broad-based consultative process in which all stakeholders will have the opportunity to fully participate in the constitutional process. For Newslink and West African Democrats Radio, I am Sankule Janko reporting from Banjul.
Away from the Gambia, the Parliamentary Minority Caucus in Ghana is demanding the immediate dismissal of the Minister of Lands and Natural Resources and the Minister of Science, Environment and Innovation over rising activities of illegal miners which threaten water production in the country. The latest demand by the minority in Parliament comes at a time when the management of the Ghana Water Limited has cautioned that water treatment will soon be practically impossible as a result of pollution from illegal mining. From Accra, WADR's Nadiri Tete has more.
Addressing the media in Parliament, minority spokesperson on Lands and Forestry, Alassane Suhini, demanded the dismissal of the Minister of Science, Environment and Innovation, Ophelia Hayford, and Minister of Lands and Natural Resources, Samuel Abujinapo, by President Akufo-Addo over the Galamsey menace. The Tamale North MP charged the President to use his final days in office to fight the canker to prove he and his appointees are not benefiting from the illegality.
Anything short of that will mean our suspicions that Galamsey is a regime-sponsored and supported rape of the state is true. We also demand a statement from the President on the state of our environment immediately.
Meanwhile, Speaker of Ghana's Parliament, Alban Kinsforsumma Nabagbin, has stated that some members of Parliament cannot escape blame for the ravages of the activities of illegal miners in the country. According to the Speaker, some MPs are neck deep in the illegal mining activities.
If we take census, some of you will be there, and the people you are talking to are aware. It's not that they are not aware, they are aware that some of you are participating in it. So please, first, desist from doing it yourself. Don't go to them for the money for your campaigns. Don't go to solicit their votes. Let them see you work. Truly, it's a disgrace that we've gone to this far. Look at the water. Horrible.
Illegal mining operations in Ghana have become a primary cause of water pollution, with estimates indicating that around 60% of the country's water bodies are contaminated. The use of toxic chemicals, particularly mercury, in the gold extraction process poses severe risks to both the environment and public health. For WADR, Nadiri Tete, Accra.
Well, still in Ghana, members of parliament from both the majority and minority sides were engaged in a heated debate concerning the pollution of Ghana's water bodies. Majority member Frank Arno Dompre accused the opposition of being the primary contributors to illegal mining in the water bodies, while minority leader Cassiel Ato-Forson argued that such an accusation implicated the Akufo-Addo government failure to effectively combat the issue. Listen to them on the floor of Parliament, starting first with Arno Dompre and then Ato-Forson.
Sit down and listen. And I'm very happy when the minority leader challenged us that we will debate this matter and the culprit will be mentioned. In fact, we are ready to debate now. If we are are to look and investigate both sides of the house. You have had the opportunity to rule this country before. I can tell you, you polluted the water more than us. You polluted the water more than us. So let's get matters straight.
Speaker, this is as a result of Galamsey. And he is the Minister for Defense. The President of State is President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. So if the President has failed, he should admit so. And if he has failed as a Minister for Defense in tackling Galamsey, he should admit so. It is wrong for him to cast insinuations and aspersions and creating impressions that somebody is making political statement. The executive power of state is with the President. And you are the Minister for Defense. If you can tell us that you cannot deploy the military to stop Galamsey, but you can deploy the military to stop the exportation of maize, and so we should clap for you. Mr. Speaker, the issues we are talking about, they are serious issues. Our livelihood is threatened.
You are listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and online on wadr.org. Here's a reminder of our top stories. The Nigerian police blames a Boko Haram terrorist group for a deadly attack in the northeast that killed at least 80 people. Burkina Faso unveils new digital passport without ECOWAS logo. Mali publishes a report on the impact of recent flooding in the country. Still ahead in the news, the China-Africa Summit gets underway in Beijing as African leaders sign economic investment deals. We also have the press review, guest interview, and sports news. Please stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Many thanks for staying with us. In news beyond West Africa, the 9th edition of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation gets underway today, Wednesday, in Beijing, with several African heads of state in attendance. The summit runs under the theme "Joining Hands to Advance Modernization and Build a High-Level China-Africa Community with a Shared Future." China, a principal donor to the Black Continent, is hosting African countries that are facing multifaceted economic crisis. This forum comes at a time when China wants to deepen its ties with Africa, especially in the economy, infrastructure, and bilateral cooperations, among others. Augustine Coley explains.
On the eve of this 9th China and Africa Summit, Chinese President Xi Jinping held a series of meetings with several African heads of state. During an audience on Tuesday with Kenyan President William Ruto, the issue of safeguarding national sovereignty was discussed. Nairobi and Beijing want to better boost cooperation in the areas of digital economy, new energies, trade, and the fight against poverty, among others. South Africa, for its part, wants the trade imbalance between the Asian giant and the African countries to be corrected. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa called on his Chinese counterpart to invest sustainably on the African continent to create more jobs. With Malian President Assimi Goïta, their discussions centered on energy, mines, and especially security, with agreements already signed in this regard. Beijing is now committed to supplying Bamako with military equipment. As a reminder, the last China and African Summit was held in Dakar in November 2021. The action plan resulting from the meeting proposes the promotion and facilitation of trade, strategic access to the market, and the valorization of products. At the time, China pledged to import $300 billion worth of goods from Africa between 2022 and 2024.
Augustine Coley with that report.
This is the newspaper review. Stay abreast and find out what the top stories are in your country.
This is the newspaper review.
The newspaper review.
Well, once again, from Banjul, Sankule Janko is standing by to bring us a brief of major headlines on the front pages of Gambian national dailies.
Hello there, and welcome to this edition of the paper review. Let's begin with the Standard newspaper. And the lead story on the Standard newspaper reads, Gambian woman arrested in Angola for killing adopted daughter. Barrow louds Gambia-China partnership. That's President Barrow, who is currently in China. to attend the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation Summit. PURA, that is Public Utility Regulatory Authority, says enforcement against Russian oil company delayed by sudden change of policy. This other story reads, woman arrested with drugs hidden in underwear at the airport. Let's move on to the Fourier newspaper. Finance Minister to brief NAMS on annual budget implementation. That is the lead story on the Standard newspaper. PURA says apology, FZC not issued with license. Mohas says central bank processing payment of stipend to Gambian students in Morocco. Mohas is Ministry of Higher Education, Research, Science and Technology. This comes as Gambian students in Morocco said they've not been paid their stipend for a couple of months. But according to Mohas, the central bank is processing this said payments for Gambian students to get their stipend. This other one reads, Trade Ministry engages Gambian journalists, CSOs on free trade protocols. Now let's move on to the final newspaper for today, and that is The Point newspaper. And the lead story on The Point newspaper reads, PURA slams government policy as obstacle to investigate apology. Others, of course. This is related to the ongoing parliamentary committee investigation on fuel scandal that involves over $30 million. According to reports, these particular companies have not been licensed, and there's been some very dodgy processes before they could come to being. GFA party promises better Gambia on assuming reins of governance. Council decries wars or deals in trying to access water. And the final story for today reads, MRCG strengthening capacities to readily respond to Mpox. I'm afraid these are the major stories making headlines on Gambian dailies. And it's back to you in the studio.
Sankule Janko there with the press review.
Politics,
analysis on major news,
social matters and all. This is A Guest.
Now, as discussions unfold at the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, major concerns are focused on the positive outcome of this summit, particularly for Africa. Our guest, Professor Gorgijan, a political analyst, emphasizes that the impact of China's growing economic presence in Africa requires rigorous assessment, especially in the areas of economy, infrastructure, development, security and technology. The political analyst also wants African heads of state to be deliberate in their quest for economic assistance from China.
This is a very important summit, and I believe that economically speaking, it is more important than when we take into account the political aspect of it and the diplomatic aspect of it. If you focus on the economy, we believe that this summit is very important because it can change the relationships between China and Africa, but it can also change the relationships between Africa and Europe and between Africa and America and the rest of the world. And if we take the economy, we have noticed that in the first semester of 2024 only, $168 billion represent the economic exchanges between the continent of Africa and then China and South Africa occupying the first position. So you see then that China is, with this figure, the first partner of Africa.
Do you think individually, as these countries go with their separate agenda, will help Africa in general to benefit when these countries have their separate economic agenda?
Now, I said that each country has got to produce its own agenda, but at the African Union level, we have to have a global agenda. This is absolutely necessary because countries like South Africa, which is the first partner on the continent with China doesn't have probably the same needs. If I take the example of another country, for example, Guinea-Bissau or Senegal, maybe what South Africa needs from China, I think it's not technology probably, because in the field of technology, South Africa is advanced. But in other fields, maybe it is not. And their needs will be based on that. But if I take the case of another country like Senegal or Guinea-Bissau or another poorer country, maybe their need is the transfer of technology, the transfer of other opportunities, loans, in order to help those countries develop their specific areas where they need development. So the different countries of Africa, even though we consider all the countries to be poor, all of them are not poor, and they don't have the same needs. So each country has got to work out a document based on its own needs, but at the African Union level, they have got to have a global agenda in their cooperation with China.
What can you say, or how can you describe China's growing economic presence on the African continent over the years?
Well, that is absolutely something normal, and there is no surprise because China has become the second largest economy in the world. So the Chinese are fighting in order to maintain that position because their economy is strong, and to help their economy stay strong, they have got to be present everywhere. And Africa is one of the places in the world which are considered to be the future of the world. And with the growing economies in Africa, the Chinese have understood that Africa is one of the places they have got to be cooperating with. And this is what they are doing because they understand the strength of Africa, the strength of the African economy, even though the African countries, they are poor, but their economies are also growing. And if you're economically strong, what you're looking for is to see to it that that economic development continues and thrives.
Professor Gargujan is a political analyst. In the world of sport, Ghana's Black Stars held their training session ahead of their AFCON qualifiers this week. 22 players took to the pitches at the Babayara Sports Stadium in Kumasi on Tuesday in readiness for the clash against Angola on Thursday, except for Jordan Ayew and Elisha Owusu, who are expected to join their colleagues today. The rest of the players were spotted training. Among those who trained on Tuesday were Captain Thomas Apati, star player Mohamed Kudus, youngster Abdul Fatau Isaku, and Inyaki Williams, amongst others. Elsewhere, a Ugandan athlete living in Kenya was set ablaze by her boyfriend and is currently receiving treatment for 75% burns, police said. Rebecca Cheptegei, a distance runner who finished in the 44th position in 2024 Paris Olympics, was attacked in her house in Western Trans-Nzoia County. Trans-Nzoia County Police Commander Jeremiah Olekosam said that Cheptegei's boyfriend, Dixon Injema, bought a jerrycan of petrol, poured it on her, and set her ablaze during a disagreement on Sunday. And that's it on Sports News. Well, with that, we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Mustafa Sek and Maudio Juve for the technical support. Do interact with us via social media platforms, X, formerly Twitter, Instagram at WADR News, and on Facebook, WADR English Service. Coming up at the bottom of the hour is our gender flagship program, 50-50 with Nadiri Teti, to be followed by the second edition of our news package in French, Info Chez Vous with Esuli Jeju. I'm Abdullahi Hassan. Good afternoon.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM.